Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. A couple of days ago, I asked you, who do you think is the next Metallica, the next band that will define metal for the next 20 or 30 years and inspire kids all over to pick up a guitar? This is a question that people all across the metalverse are constantly asking. It's something we're weirdly obsessed with, finding the next Metallica, the next big, massive, blockbuster band. And I can understand why to a certain extent, because A, it's exciting, and B, because whether we want to admit it or not, Metallica will not be around forever. These guys are in their late 50s, early 60s. One way or another, Metallica will come to an end eventually, which means there need to be new bands that need to kind of fill the role. Kind of like how Metallica and bands like Metallica were kind of filling the roles left by Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin in the 70s, getting a whole new generation of kids into rock and heavy music. In fact, earlier this week, Papa Roach lead singer Jacob E. Shadix, in an interview with Des Moines, Iowa radio station Laser 103.3, talked about the idea, the concept of a next Metallica, saying specifically, we're watching Metallica step into the Rolling Stones spot right now, and Foo Fighters are another one of those groups, and Korn, Papa Roach, and Deftones, we're like the next Metallicas, you know what I mean? That's it. We're stepping into that spot now. Is Jacoby right? Is Papa Roach the next Metallica? Can there even be a next Metallica in this environment? And considering the massive size and scale of Metallica's legacy, considering how influential and successful and iconic and famous they are. Let's take a look at what y'all have to say. Slipknot, FKR Locust 8843 says, maybe Korn or Slipknot. Perfect for gateway into heavier stuff and have inspired most bands post-2002. Let's just be honest here, Korn peaked years ago. This isn't to say that they aren't influential or successful, because they absolutely are, but consider where they are now to where they were in like the late 90s and early 2000s, and the difference is quite literally night and day. If this video was being made in the late 90s or early 2000s, the idea of Korn being the next Metallica would suddenly be a lot easier to understand and digest. But it isn't. So, yeah. Plus, Korn have been around for like 30 years, so I can't really picture them sticking around for another 20 years and still having like that colossal of a reach that they had back in the day, let alone that they have now. Slipknot, on the other hand, I think is a pretty valid argument. I would actually go as far as to argue that maybe Slipknot are already kind of in that same area as Metallica. Like, this is a band that, despite being so much more sonically abrasive than Korn and Metallica, still has a lot of crossover appeal. Like, they have a lot of huge radio hits, people love them, Slipknot sell tons of records, and they pack fucking stadiums. It helps, too, that these guys are all really active online, and they're all in the public eye. Like, Corey Taylor especially, you'll see doing, like, daytime, like, television shows and podcasts and radio programs. He's got a solo album coming out in the fall. He does all kinds of features and collaborations with unexpected artists. I feel like Slipknot has, like, another decade in them, too. So, like, the kids that bought the self-titled album back in, like, 1999, you know, they're gonna have kids, and those kids are gonna get into whatever Slipknot will be doing in the next few years or so. So, yeah, there's absolutely potential for Slipknot to be remembered in the same capacity as Metallica. They're already at that level as far as, like, fame and success and acclaim is concerned. COD Mobile Fan 2023 says Orbit Culture. I mean, they're an alright band. I just don't really see them having, like, that broad of an appeal, and having that much of a reach. I mean, who knows? They're still relatively young. That could change in a couple of years, but right now, I just don't see it. Ench3 New 5 says, gonna get shit for this, but Ghost. I'm gonna get shit for this, but you're right. Ghost have become one of the most unique, one of the most instantly recognizable bands of the modern era. They've been around for just over a decade, so they still feel relatively young within the landscape of, like, rock and metal music. They're constantly dropping hits. They're constantly pumping out music, constantly going on tour, constantly doing all kinds of crazy stuff. People will argue that all the costumes and the makeup and, the attitude and the grandiosity of the music, it's all just a gimmick, and to a certain extent, they're right, but also, shut the fuck up. It's a gimmick that works. Who gives a shit? You want to know what else is a gimmick? A bunch of fucking edgelords prancing through the fucking forest in their crappy Alice Cooper fucking cosplay, singing about fucking, the fucking mountains and Satan and whatever the fuck. AKA the entire black metal genre. How about Gwar, King Diamond, Kiss, the aforementioned Alice Cooper, all those theatrics, all that nonsense, the costumes, the makeup, the stunts. That's all a gimmick too. How come Ghost gets shit for this, but not all these other fucking bands? It's so fucking hypocritical to me. I think y'all are just mad because Ghost is a big fucking deal, plain and fucking simple. I'm not saying you have to love them, but the reality is they're a big fucking deal. And I honestly don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. So, yeah, I think Ench 3 New 5 hit the nail right on the goddamn head. Lucas Holt Greven 3359 says Clowncore. The answer is definitely Clowncore. Yeah, okay, sure it is, bud. Fallacy 1634, Hammerhead or Avenged Sevenfold or Gojira. If I have to look up who the band is, then they don't stand a chance at being the next Metallica. Period. So Hammerhead is completely out of the running. Avenged Sevenfold and Gojira, I don't know. I don't know if they're at Metallica levels per se right now, but they're definitely very influential, very popular, very successful. Who knows? There's definitely valid arguments to be made in defense of Avenged Sevenfold and Gojira. With Gojira specifically, I remember when Fortitude came out and people were like, outlets like Metal Hammer, Metal Injection, and Loudwire, they were all like, oh, this is Gojira's answer to the Black Album, I feel like at the same time, though, Avenged Sevenfold being as wacky as they are, Gojira being as progressive as they are, that's what's going to hold them back from, reaching that massive of an appeal. But even so, two very big, two very successful bands. Who knows? Maybe 5-10 years from now, they'll blow the fuck up even more so. We'll see. Anything's possible. Dirkhead says, lol, it's not going to be a band, it's going to be Nick Nocturnal. This is an interesting argument that, a social media content creator is going to kind of fill that role. That's an interesting argument. Would that person in this scenario be Nick Nocturnal, though? I don't really know, because Nick Nocturnal, even by, YouTube metal content creator social media standards, kind of niche. I mean, obviously Nick Nocturnal, very successful within kind of this field, but he also sticks mostly to metalcore and deathcore and gent kind of stuff. And I also just don't really feel like people are looking at Nick Nocturnal's content and going, yeah, I'm inspired to pick up a guitar. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I personally just don't see it. I might be biased because I just don't really care for Nick Nocturnal's content in general, but it's an interesting concept, for sure. One thing is for certain, the idea of social media content creators and people like Nick Nocturnal getting bigger and bigger and having more of an impact on rock music and on modern music in general, that's not too ridiculous of a scenario. I mean, just look at the impact that Anthony Fantano has had on the internet and on music over the course of the past decade. Whether you like him or not, there are tons of bands and tons of artists and tons of singers and producers you would not know about if not for Anthony Fantano. Period. Cool Guy Casey says, Bring Me the Horizon comes to mind, considering they are an accessible and popular band while also having metal elements to their songs. Their collabs with big names also helps broaden their reach, and I've met countless people who say that Bring Me the Horizon was their gateway band into metal. 100% agree with this, honest to God. Bring Me the Horizon still feel pretty young. They've been around for 10-15 years. They're very active on social media. They're very versatile, which is awesome. They've collabed with Ed Sheeran and Lil Uzi Vert and Baby Metal, and this has absolutely helped them broaden their appeal. They're now playing fucking stadiums and doing arena tours. They just headlined Download Fest with Metallica maybe, a month ago? Something like that. On top of making good music and on top of selling records, Bring Me the Horizon, much like Ghost and Slipknot, have crossover appeal. So, yeah, I feel this. I kind of feel this. Omega Deep Blue 1407 says Kim Dracula, Poppy, or Polyphia. Maybe Billie Eilish, if she still has plans to do a new metal album. If Billie Eilish were to do a new metal album, that would A, break the fucking internet and the brain of every single, crazy elitist gatekeeping bigot out there, and I would love that. I would pay for that. That'd be wonderful. And two, it would be a smashing success in my opinion. Like, her sound already kind of feels fitted for like new metal, So I think that makes sense. As far as these other artists you mentioned are concerned, I don't know. Maybe they're definitely very popular amongst the young people right now. I can definitely picture people listening to Polyphia specifically and wanting to like pick up a guitar, like being so wowed by it and being like, "Holy shit, I gotta learn how to play that." Saber8050 says, Sunless, the way they made that avant disso dev composition style sound more catchy and accessible than its predecessor without sacrificing too much brutality and complexity continues to blow my mind. You are absolutely fucking delusional if you really think like an avant-garde dissonant death metal band is going to like fill the role of Metallica. Straight the fuck up. Nangarzed00 says, currently I think that Slipknot or Avenged Sevenfold, despite their age, could be such a band, but in the future I also see a lot of potential in bands like Polyphia or Sleep Token to gain such popularity. You know what? I'm gonna get some hate for this, but there's some validity to the Sleep Token argument. I don't feel like metalheads really understand how popular Sleep Token is right now. Like, they are all over TikTok. Like, they've been trending literally ever since The Summoning dropped. And their fan base is super fucking dedicated to the point of appearing somewhat crazy and literally quite cultish. They literally call themselves the fucking cult, for God's sakes. Sleep Token is already very popular and very hot and very trendy. It's not unreasonable to assume that 10 years from now, they could be an absolutely massive fucking band. User FQ7RT3PB6U, because God forbid we just have a username, says, in terms of influence and adding a new ingredient to the metal stew, the next Metallica was Meshuggah. Interesting how you would say was and not is. I don't agree with Meshuggah being the next Metallica. Not at this point. They've been around for like 30 fucking years. I just don't see it. But there is an argument to be made that Meshuggah are the Metallica of gent and like modern progressive metal, because there's a lot happening in these genres that you can trace back to what Meshuggah was doing and what they're continuing to do. Evilone1079, Five Finger Death Punch, one of the most consistent bands around. Five Finger Death Punch, definitely very popular, definitely very successful. I don't really feel like people are going to be remembering Five Finger Death Punch, though, like, once they're gone. I feel like once this band is done, once they've done their thing, that'll kind of be it. I don't really see a lot of what they've done having, like, that staying power and having that lasting influence. I could be wrong, but I don't really see it. I don't. Not at all. Astolfo, the Rider of Black, says, Linkin Park, say what you want about their outputs, but commercially and sales-wise, they are the only ones who come close to the success that Metallica themselves achieved. Hybrid Theory alone was certified diamond, meaning 10 million people in the United States alone bought their album, and that's not counting worldwide sales. And just like Metallica, Linkin Park also inspired a new generation of musicians and bands. They were the poster childs of the 2000s metal scene, even with polarizing albums like Minutes to Midnight, or more famously, A Thousand Sun. It's really hard to argue with this argument. Linkin Park had massive, monumental crossover appeal. If Chester Bennington were still alive today and if Linkin Park were still active, I can only assume that they would just continue to grow and evolve, and they would continue to pack fucking stadiums. The fact is, there are tons of kids that got into music and got through tough times because of Linkin Park. It is not unfair to assume that the kids that bought Hybrid Theory, 20 fucking years ago, are showing their kids Hybrid Theory and other records like it right now. Mindful2864, I don't know if there will ever be a band to replace Metallica. The closest we have, though, is Evil, especially the albums Enter the Grave, Infected Nations, and Five Serpents' Teeth. This is another interesting argument. Evil is a band that quite famously, as we've talked about many a time here on the Metal Meltdown, loves Metallica. They've emulated the fuck out of the Metallica. They've arguably been copying them since day fucking one. They even formed as a Metallica cover band back in like the early 2000s. And it is fair to say that Evil was essential to, like, the modern thrash metal resurgence in the late 2000s and early 2010s. But Metallica levels of success? Nah. This argument really only truly fully works if we're looking exclusively at the music. And even in that scenario, I feel like bands like Municipal Waste and Power Trip, though not as faithful to the Metallica sound per se, have done far more in bringing thrash metal to tons and tons of people. However, also, I literally knew kids that were getting inspired to play guitar and to learn drums after hearing Enter the Grave. So, I don't know. One thing is for certain, Evil, despite their best efforts, are not going to reach Metallica levels of fame and success. Though they may continue to have some success and they may continue to have some influence in their own way over the years. Frank F684 says, guy from Papa Roach says it's Papa Roach, Deftones, and Korn, and he can't be wrong, right? Question mark, lol. But I would say Slipknot or Korn or Tool. I'm not talking music quality, just the ability to keep selling to large arena crowds. I think Tool, in a way, are at that level within the confines of, like, progressive and alternative metal. Like, they're doing that big Power Trip festival later this year with Metallica, as well as with Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, Judas Priest, AC/DC, so it's definitely fair to say that they are a very popular, very successful, very influential band. At the same time, though, I feel like hype for Tool has, generally speaking, died down a bit following Fear Inoculum, which took way too long to come out and frankly was super hella fucking mid. As far as what the guy from Papa Roach said, I think he's a little fucking ridiculous to think that Papa Roach are the next Metallica when they've been around for 30 fucking years. And to be honest, I don't know a single fucking song from them aside from Last Resort. Like, in my mind, they're a one-hit wonder band. Against the Wickedly, Def D323 says the most logical answer, in my opinion, would probably be Trivium. However, they're far enough into their career at this point that I feel they may have fell short. You can kind of copy and paste what I said about Evil and apply it to Trivium. I mean, this is a band that, not to the extent of Evil, but even so, has really copied a lot of what Metallica did. And it's worked for them. They have put their own spin on it, to be fair. Like, Trivium, I would say, is inarguably a much more versatile band. And they have, also, to their credit, I think, influenced a lot of bands on a smaller scale. But, yeah, I can't really see them being at, like, Metallica level. Jeff Enduran says Crypta from Brazil, for one. Those women are bringing some real meat and potatoes melodeath metal to the upcoming generations. Sure? I don't know. I mean, they're a cool band, don't get me wrong, but are we really going to sit here and pretend that, like, as Jeff puts it, meat and potatoes melodeath metal is going to, like, inspire a new generation of musicians? Are we really going to sit here and act as if an underground death metal band is going to have the reach and appeal and impact of Metallica? No, I mean, you can pretend that if you like, but I'm not gonna waste my time with that. Are you ready to hear something crazy, though, folks? The most common consensus wasn't surrounding a band or even the idea of there being a next Metallica. The consensus in the comments section is actually that there cannot be a next Metallica, that there will not be a next Metallica. Taladads, for instance, writes, there will never be that type of inspiration from one band again, I don't think. Biomechanical Zombie says, I honestly don't think that band has emerged yet. Lots of people doing new versions of old school music, and the ones who aren't are doing avant-garde and are not to the masses' taste. And some of my fellow content creators have chimed in as well. Mad Mike here saying, in terms of popularity, I don't think there could ever be a next Metallica. We're talking about a band that has more #1 albums than the Beatles and continues to fill up stadiums all over the world. And Metal Trench is going even further, writing that the idea of a big legacy act is dead, in my opinion. And in my opinion, these people, pause for dramatic effect, are... Actually, hold that thought. I gotta go take a shit. Alright, Chompy, I'm leaving you in charge until I get back, alright? I'll see you in a little bit. Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone. Good job, buddy. I knew I could count on you. Um, Anyways, yeah, all these people are probably right. And I want to be clear, if there is going to be a next Metallica, then it makes sense to me that bands like Bring Me the Horizon, uh, Ghost, Slipknot, Linkin Park, that they probably have the most chance and opportunity to kind of be remembered and held in that same regard, on top of already continuing to be very successful and famous. But also the environment and the set of circumstances which allowed Metallica to become even more powerful and successful, to make even more money and to reach even more people, they don't really exist anymore. Like when Metallica was dropping music in the 80s, even though there were lots of other thrash metal bands, there wasn't really anyone doing it as successfully and with the level of acclaim as Metallica. Like, Metallica was one of the first metal bands to be nominated for a Grammy, and one of the first metal bands to win a Grammy, and that all happened in the 80s. They had tons of hit music videos, despite being a way heavier band. They had hit singles, despite being a way heavier band. And let's just acknowledge that whether you like the Black Album or not, it is a colossal success. It is one of the best-selling albums of all time. It continues to sell 5,000 copies every single fucking week. Load and Reload, and Saint Anger, and Death Magnetic, warts and all, were also massive commercial hits, and so were more recent albums like Hardwired to Self-Destruct and the most recent album, 72 Seasons. Metallica debuted in an environment where the type of music they were playing didn't exist. They dropped the Black Album in an environment where an album like the Black Album didn't exist. And they have continued to try new things, and they have continued to expand and evolve and reach large audiences. Whether y'all like it or not, last year's, the obsession with Eddie Munson and Stranger Things is a great example of this. They have reached an entire new generation of fans entirely because of the Eddie Munson character and Stranger Things, and Master of Puppets being used in a pivotal fight scene from the show. Like, they're just constantly ahead of the curve on so many things, and for anyone to really reach the level that Metallica is at and has been at for roughly 20 years, you're gonna have to go above and beyond the Call of Duty. You're really gonna have to do some mind-blowing, earth-shattering, multiverse, changing forever shit. And I don't know if that's possible in this current environment where people, for the most part, have shorter attention spans when it comes to new music. In this environment where physical album sales aren't really prioritized anymore. And also where, let's be honest here, rock music as a whole isn't as popular anymore as other genres of music. I mean, there's a whole other discussion to be had in regards to the state of modern rock, and for the record, I think it's healthier than most people would argue, but it would be extremely disingenuous of me to ignore that modern rock, it's not kicking the same amounts of public ass that, 70s and 80s and even 90s rock was. So in a way, I don't know if there can be a next Metallica, not without fundamental changes to how we make, promote, and consume music. But who knows? I've been wrong before on many an occasion, and I am by no means an expert, especially not on stuff like this, so we'll see. Anything is possible. For the time being, let's just take solace in the fact that there are tons of great bands out there kicking all kinds of ass, doing all kinds of cool things, and trying really hard to just make cool music and bring it to all kinds of people. That's good enough for me, honestly. And voila! That is it for the Metal Meltdown. I don't have much more to say. Please feel free to continue chiming in if you have more to say. Who do you think is the next Metallica? Do you agree with this idea of there not being a next Metallica? And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. If you have not already chimed in, please do so now. Tell me, do you think there can be a next Metallica? If yes, who? Why? Make sure you subscribe if you have not already. Make sure you check out other videos on the Metal Meltdown if you have not already. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Threads. Join us on Discord. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.